week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defenses I would start this week. The first team's the Green Bay Packers, so the Packers defense and special teams, they've been pretty solid over the last few weeks here. Week 3 at the San Francisco 49ers, 28 points allowed, 4 sacks, an into and a fumble recovery. Week 4 versus the Steelers, 17 points, 2 sacks, an into, a fumble recovery. And week 5 at Cincinnati, 22 points, 3 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So right here in week 6, they got a matchup with division rival, the Chicago Bears in Soldier Field, and the Bears give up the 7th most fantasy points to defenses this season. And I recommended the Packers as an ad on the waiver wire this week. And this week, I think they could do damage at Chicago. So far, Justin Fields, he hasn't looked that good, in my opinion. David Montgomery, we know he's hurt, even though Damian Williams and Herbert looked pretty good filling in for Montgomery last week. But I think this Packer defense, they're going to make a few plays on Fields in this Bear team, get a few sacks, in my opinion, because that Bear O-line isn't that good. And their definite start this week, the second defense is the Los Angeles Rams. So the Rams, they've had some tough matchups over the last few weeks, but still a defense that came through for the most part, besides in week 4 versus Arizona, where they gave up 37 points and 3 sacks. And then week 5 at Seattle, a pretty decent game that knocked out Russell Wilson with a broken finger. 17 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 windows, and a 4th down stop. And now week 6, they got an amazing matchup at the New York Giants, who are decimated with injuries. Daniel Jones, he went out with a concussion. I doubt he plays in this one. Barkley and Kenny Golladay, they're probably not playing. Tani, who had a big breakout game versus Dallas at wide receiver, he may not even be playing either. And Slayton and Shepard are questionable. So right here, Aaron Donald and this defensive line, they're just going to pounce, in my opinion, on Mike Glennon and this Giant offensive line, which isn't that strong either. So right here, this could be a huge fantasy day, and one of the biggest days I think we see from a DST this season with the Rams matchup at the Giants, and they're an obvious start. The next defense is the Indianapolis Colts. So the Colts, they played a pretty decent game in the first half versus the Baltimore Ravens until Lamar Jackson went on his Superman stuff in week 5 in that ball game on Monday Night Football. So right here, they got a great matchup versus the Houston Texans that give up the 6th most fantasy points to DSTs, even though last week I was really high on the New England Patriots DST, and they didn't come through and play good, only having 5 fantasy points in this one. But this Colt team, they're 1-4 this season. They're struggling, but obviously they got some good players on that defensive side of things. And I think in this game, David Mills, he's going to be under more pressure, and they're going to make a few turnovers happen, in my opinion, unlike we saw last week where David Mills had a great game versus that New England DST. So right now, if you need a defense, the Colts, they're available as well in 50% of fantasy leagues, and I like them as a start this week. The next defense is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So the Steelers, last week, they got things going, and they beat the Denver Broncos in a thrilling ball game, and now they go to 2-3 on the season. But right here, week 6, they got a great matchup, in my opinion, versus the Seattle Seahawks with no Russell Wilson now, with Geno Smith at quarterback. And I'll be honest, Geno Smith, he came in relief for Wilson in that week 5 ball game versus the Rams, and he played pretty good football till the end, until he threw an interception. But right here, week 6, this Steeler team, I think they're going to get to Geno. They're going to make him cause a few turnovers. And let's be honest, Geno Smith, he was a bust with the New York Jets, and he's been a backup to Wilson a few seasons, and he's rarely saw the field. I know Geno still got good weapons with Metcalf and Lockett, but I think this Steeler DST can make a few plays in this game and get the pressure on Smith and make him turn it over. And the 5th and final defense I would start this week's the Miami Dolphins. So their 1-week start is this Dolphin team here, and they got a good matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars in another London game here in week 6. So Miami's DST, they haven't done nothing since week 3 at the Raiders, where they had 29 points allowed, 3 sacks and into, and a pick 6 in that one with a 4th down stop. But the last 2 weeks, doing nothing. Week 4 versus Indy, 27 points allowed, 2 sacks, and a fumble recovery. And week 5 at Tampa Bay, 45 points allowed. They got scorched in that one and 2 sacks. But right here, it's a good matchup versus Jacksonville. Most fantasy points to DSTs this season. I think the Dolphins, who are available in 80% of fantasy leagues, could at least make a few plays and get some pressure on Lawrence. I don't think they'll have the greatest of days, but their defense I definitely would start in 12-team leagues, so that's a few defenses I would start here in week 6 of the fantasy football season.